Rinzen, welcome to the Chasing Creativity podcast.
Thank you, man. It's good to be here.
Yeah, man, this is really cool, and truly thank you for coming on. I am so stoked to do this. I think a little background probably would fit well for this one because this thing has become like almost a mousetrap podcast unintentionally. I think a little bit, but yeah, man. So I've known your music for a long time, or known of your music for a long time. Hearing things like the Monophobia remix is still one of my favorite songs today.
Yeah,
I mean,
awesome.
it's up there. And when I started this podcast, you were one of the guys kind of that was in the back of my mind, like on a short list, like for real, like just being such a fan of your music, and such. So being able to chat today, I am so stoked. So thank you for coming on.
Well, I really appreciate that, man. It's always cool to talk to people who have engaged with my music for like a longer amount of time and kind of know some of my tracks and what I'm about. And I really appreciate that you have a podcast dedicated entirely to creativity and having conversations with artists and researchers. I mean, that's obviously a subject that I'm super interested in.
Cool.
So I think it made a lot of sense to come on here and talk with you.
Sweet, man. Yeah, this is going to be very cool because one thing that I want to talk a lot about today is not just the music, but the visual components associated with the music that you put out, the worlds that you build for the releases, all the concept. I mean, there's so much there. There's so much there. But why don't we kind of go back to how this started, early childhood? Did you play music as a kid? What got you interested in music? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I think my story, maybe like more of a universal thing, but it didn't used to be. But I didn't grow up playing music. I wasn't really ever in a band, you know. I always was fascinated by music and I liked it. And, you know, I was making like mixtapes and stuff for myself, but I never considered myself like a music file or audio file. It wasn't really until I went to college and kind of was in a community of like-minded people who were really interested in electronic music and going to shows and stuff, and I really fell in love with it, and particularly started going to festivals like Ultra Music Festival and Lightning in a Bottle. And I think at that age I was very impressionable, and seeing the scale of these types of events and seeing performances by people like the Chemical Brothers or Deadmau5 at Treasure Island and EDC, I think those experiences really shaped my mind at that time and kind of opened up this new world for me. And it wasn't even like I immediately was like, oh, I need to be a DJ, I need to be a producer. It was more, I was just enamored by the whole experience. Like, this is a whole entire like universe that I know a little bit about, but it goes so deep, and there's people who are doing such insane things from both like a visual and a musical standpoint with it. And then I think over the years, I was so fascinated that I naturally just began DJing a little bit. And then at a certain point, I realized, hey, if I actually want to do this a little bit more seriously, or at least play bigger DJ gigs, then I probably should learn to make music as well. And so it was about, I think, junior or senior year in college when I got like a free trial of Ableton, and then tried it out, ended up liking it, and then I've just been doing it ever since.
Yeah. So what were you studying? Because I know you were in that program, but you later on went to Icon, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So I was up at UC Berkeley studying English and literature, and for my entire life up to that point, that was kind of my vision for my life, is I was going to be a writer in some capacity, either as a journalist or, you know, working on fiction on the side or something like that. And I mean, to this day, that's still one of my passions, but it's definitely segued as music is now my number one. But yeah, I was just like a book nerd. Like I loved studying literature and like the world's greatest authors, and, you know, reading these like epic poems like Paradise Lost or So I still carry that fascination with literature into me, and that's kind of what I like to do with my work now, is almost give it some literary power, whether that be the backstory or making the scope of the vision something that's kind of like a book, you know. So it's still very much a part of me.
That's so cool, because it seems like a perfect fit, because you can have those interests, and that was something that was, I'm understanding, a huge part of your life, but then you can push it and kind of mold it into something else when it gets applied to the music. And that's, as I understand, what comes through when you have concept albums, like everything that's been really released as the three track and 2-track release on Mousetrap, where they have the concept art associated with the releases that kind of create this immersive world. So it is really cool. You get to blend all of these different things together.
Yeah, well, that's one thing I like about studying authors or studying literature. It's like some of these guys are just the masters of world building. You know, I read like a Neil Stephenson science fiction book, and it's 1,000 pages of him creating this entire alternative universe. And you're just like, you're absorbed in this thing for maybe a month or 2 months. And that's on such a different scale of like world building that if I can just bring a little bit of that into my music, then I'm already going to make something different and a little bit more interesting.
Yo, absolutely. Yeah. And I love it because you listen to the tracks, especially the ones that are more associated with the concept art, aside from the more the remixes maybe don't have that same aspect. Like it's not a project that like, let's just say Exoplanet, for instance, right? Where there's the visual component, the tracks are associated with something like extraterrestrial, and when you get to address a project like that, I would imagine it's so much fun. And speaking to what you just said, it's so unique because it has the cinematic feel, it has the electronic music behind it, and this kind of merging of everything coming together is so powerful. It's so unique. It's fresh. It's really, really cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I think with the concept EPs in particular, those are a chance for me to really go deep into that kind of world building aspect. Whereas, like you said, sometimes with the remix, maybe it's more like utilitarian, or like I'm making it more for this specific purpose or for this artist or for this label. So I don't always have the chance to get as conceptual, but I think that's okay. I kind of like having this duality where I can make club tracks and make underground tracks, but also make things that are more conceptual, like Prologue or Exoplanet or Forbidden City, that can kind of exist on their own. And like, yes, maybe they do work in the club world still, like that's my hope, but that's maybe not their main intention.
Right. Yeah, and it's such a cool balance too. I would imagine it almost makes it very fun because being so immersed in one project that has these visual components, then being able to switch gears and then make something that's more fit for like a club track, something like that would be, I would imagine, really fun to go back and forth. And then when you get back to working on, say, a concept, three track EP, something of that sort, it would be very refreshing to get back to.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's good to kind of mix it up and always be working on something that is for maybe a different audience or different intention. And yeah, it's funny with these remixes too. I actually think my writing background really prepared me well for them because like in college, I spent 4 years doing these essays on these really short deadlines, like final exams and whatnot. Yeah. And I'm honestly doing the exact same thing now, just with remixes. Like I'll have like a week or 5 days to turn around this huge remix, and it's the same exact process I went through in college, where it was like, oh my god, I only have 5 days to write this 15-page paper. How am I going to do this? And then you just have to show up every day, be very disciplined, have a plan, and like there's no time for procrastination. So I'm actually really thankful that all that essay writing kind of prepared me, at least mentally, for what I'm doing now.
Oh, for sure. And that's something that I heard in a previous interview with you, and I really wanted to jump into because I read, or I think I heard, I'm not sure where now, that one book you love is Stephen Pressfield's The War on Art, and that's something I haven't actually read it. I'm familiar with the book though, and I think it's awesome, and it would be a good time to bring that up because it's all about discipline behind the artwork. It's not, Yeah,
honestly, it's probably my favorite book of any book, fiction or nonfiction, and it's definitely the one I've given the most people. In fact, I was even reading it earlier today just because it's one of those books that I kind of carry around with me. It's really small and like you don't need context for it. Like every page is like a different lesson. So it's something that any creative person can get a lot of value of and something that you can really come back to time and time again. And I've grown to really love Stephen Pressfield's work in general. War of Art is his most famous book, but he also has like Turning Pro and Do the Work, a bunch of other kind of creative manuals, if you will.
Yeah.
But honestly, I've never met someone who's read it and not had like a profound experience. Yeah. So you should honestly read it yourself.
I need to, and I, I heard about it through the Joe Rogan Experience. I think he was on.
Really?
I'm a huge fan of that podcast. It's a great podcast.
Stephen Pressfield was on it? Oh, I got to listen to that.
I'm pretty certain, or Joe Rogan will talk about it a lot, but I think he's been on at least one episode. I'm pretty
Okay,
certain.
cool.
But yeah. And I love the idea about, because a lot of times with creative people, and this is something I've spoken about this before, but when I was very young, I thought that beautiful music or these, bouts of genius or whatever were just granted by whatever, something came down, these bands I loved when I was so young. I just thought, oh, these guys are just, they roll out of bed and they write this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful music. And I'm learning on now down the road that it's not like that. It's oftentimes you have to be very disciplined in what you're doing. And just, if you feel like you have a roadblock, you just push through it. You just, every day you show up, you put a certain amount of time in and you work through it. And that's a big message through his book, as I understand it, is just not getting caught up in this, when the ideas come to me, which is important, but just sitting down at certain times and saying, this is when I work, I'm going to get it done.
Yeah, I think it's one giant lesson in like not making excuses. And for anyone who's like kind of having writer's block or just immersed in the creative process in general, we all make excuses all the time. Like, you're like, I feel a little bit sick. Maybe I shouldn't go to the studio, or like, I don't know, this idea is not that good. I'm just going to like work on something else.
Yep.
But it's kind of showing you that all these excuses are just like us kind of procrastinating, really, or mainly just manifesting a fear inside of us that our work is not enough or it's not good enough. And his books are a way of kind of shining a light on that fear and exposing it and showing how universal it is, that everyone, no matter what you're making, no matter if it's just a song or it's like the Mona Lisa, everyone's having those same doubts and fears. And it's kind of this universal force that it's not going to go away. We're always going to be afraid in some capacity, but the thing to do is to work despite the fear and to push forward despite it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it's funny because that has come up time and time again through these conversations. And I love hearing that. And I'm sure people listening who are fans of your music are just thinking, okay, Rinzen has these same thoughts, that it's like, there's part of that, because for real, I mean, it's come up time and time again where it's this thought of, kind of anxiety around releases and this thought where if someone's listening to their own music, okay, I'm kind of happy with it, but I listen to my friend's music and oh my God, it's amazing, And when everyone starts realizing that everyone's having those thoughts, it makes it a kind of a different playing field, and it'll allow you, and I mean you as in like the universal you, everyone out there, to kind of just, I don't know, at least find comfort in that. That's a big thing for me, is finding comfort where I'm understanding, hey, everyone's having those same things, and it's a battle that everyone's going through.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I always come back to, is how universal it is. And I think particularly when you're working in the studio every day, it's like your mentality and mind state is so important that if you start suffering from that self-doubt, you might go a week or 2 weeks without working, and that's hugely detrimental. So, I mean, I think the more you can kind of cultivate like a really good positive approach to your creativity, just naturally you're going to make way more music. You're going to be less stressed and less frustrated during it. But of course, that's so hard to do. It's so easy for me to say that, but even I have huge periods where I'm like, I haven't written anything good in like 2 weeks. Like maybe I'm not so naturally talented at this, and maybe, like I think it's no matter where you are and no matter like how far along on this journey, you're always going to have periods of that. Mm-hmm. But I think the more kind of resources and tools that you can draw upon, things like the War of Art, or I watch a lot of like TED Talks for inspiration. The more of these resources that you have to kind of pull you out of those moments, the better off you're going to be.
Mm. Yeah, and speaking to that same idea, because I think that's super important, is over this period, I'm assuming, working on music, learning this craft, you have understood with yourself certain, I don't want to say techniques, but just certain things specific to you that help in that creative process. Maybe it's like time of the day where you really feel like the music's coming out well, or the ideas are flowing, or what's that been like? Mm-hmm. Have you found certain things for yourself that really help in that process?
Yeah, for sure. I think this is a Neil Gaiman thing, the fantasy author. He was like, as close as you can come to Groundhog Day, the movie, like reliving the same day over and over.
Yeah.
That's where you're going to find you're most productive and efficient. So I feel like the last 3 years for me have been a process of figuring out what is my ideal creative day. Like, what does that look like? What are the hours? What am I eating? How long am I working? You know, what am I doing to not get distracted while I work? And it's been slowly perfecting this thing for over 3 years. And fortunately, I've been able to stay in one spot, and I've been working in the same studio space for that long. So I feel like I've just been dialing in my routine for that long. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I can go into it further if you want to know like what it actually looks like. But
totally. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, for sure. Well, I am definitely of the mindset of I like working later in the day when there's less distractions. So I tend to like knock out all my important emails and like any writing I need to do, or, you know, the administrative side of music in the morning or in the early afternoon. And then by the time I hit the studio, usually I don't have anything else that I need to do that day. So it's like my mind is completely focused on music, and I'll even go as far as turning off my Wi-Fi, turning my cell phone on airplane mode, and literally just trying to limit distractions as much as possible, create as much mental space as possible, and then ideally just work for, 6 to 7, 8 hours. I've also found that like I'm not the person who can work for 10 or 12 hours straight. Like I will if I have a big remix deadline. Yeah. But for me to do that every day is not sustainable. Like my ears get fatigued and my hands and wrists get tired, and I just, the work suffers. So I found the sweet spot for me is like working on music about 6 to 7, sometimes 8 hours a day. Yeah. And yeah, that's kind of just, like I said, I relive that day almost every day. So.
I love that, man. That's so cool because really it's a discipline, and you found you're optimizing this whole process. You found exactly what works for you, and then you're thinking, okay, let's just put it on repeat. And I mean that's amazing because it totally makes sense. It's you find what works and then you just repeat it. And I love how you have approached this in a very kind of pragmatic calculated way, where you're kind of looking at all of these things that really influence you positively and applying those, and then being very regimented in how you move forward. I think that's fascinating, and I think it speaks to also the incredible the incredible work you've put out over a really short time. From 2017 to 2019, you've had this crazy string of releases with Mousetrap, with the remixes and the other releases on European labels, which I want to get into. Some remixes that are unreleased today. That so there's so much stuff. So it's so cool because I think it does come down to that. It's not this process that I think people may think, where it's like, maybe it's how I used to think, that I was like, it'll come if it comes, right? No, you're very, very regimented with it. It's very, very cool.
Yeah, well, first of all, I appreciate all of that. And yeah, like I said, it's been a slow process of getting here. I think when I first started trying to do music a little bit more full time, I didn't have this kind of discipline, and it was a lot more sporadic, and I was not as efficient. So I think this is purely of a consequence of the fact that I've been doing this for a long time now, and I've had the ability to kind of refine this daily routine. Yeah. But it's definitely when I'm like the most productive and happiest is when I'm in my routine, and like I can be here for a few weeks, and that's when I feel like my best work comes about, because that pressure is kind of gone. Like I know I can be in the studio every day for this amount of hours, and it gets hard though when you're traveling, or if you end up getting super sick or something, and anything that throws off that routine is really hard to wrestle with. But then it comes back to that whole thing of making excuses, and like maybe this is me rationalizing when I'm not working enough. I'm like, I'm traveling, so maybe that's why I'm not in the studio enough. So I don't know. I don't have all the answers, but I do have my routine.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah, I mean, every day for everyone is there's going to be new things to figure out, and there's new that's why music, I think, is so fascinating. It's so fun because these steps open new opportunities. You have a success with a release or whatever that is for everyone out there. Everyone has their personal accomplishments, and you hit that, and then it's kind of what's next, and you learn more about yourself, you learn more about the process. Yeah,
and I think that's one of the hardest things about this. I mean, we get so focused on the problems of failure and not making it, but I think when you start to have any type of success, it brings its own problems along with it. And one of those things is like pressure or that fear of what's going to come next. And I think the hardest thing to do sometimes is enjoy things that already are happening. And like I'll play at a festival or release an EP, and already my brain is like, but what's next? Like what we have to get to the studio tonight. Like what, so I think I've been working on doing a better job of kind of practicing gratitude and focusing on all the things that are going well, because I think if you're looking for things that are not going well or that aren't the best or as perfect as they could be, you're always going to find them. And I think that can lead to a very negative outlook. But if you're focusing on the things that are going well, then naturally you're going to have a more positive, optimistic outlook. And it's, again, going to make your day-to-day working creative life like that much more kind of joyful and less stressful. But it's hard, man. It's a balance.
Oh, yeah. And I think that it's so interesting because I think there are benefits to, I don't want to say a negative, there are benefits to being, when you're working on a project, I don't want to say even hard on yourself, like nitpicky or having an idea with a track and saying, okay, this still has 4 or 5 more steps to go, and that's that same mentality that can be like, what's next? So it's this balance of having this very, I don't know how to put it, like non-optimistic view when you're working on music almost. I found that with myself at least, like very, working in a certain way where I'm almost a little bit more hard on myself. But then when you have these experiences where something has gone in a nice direction, to pause and to appreciate it and to really try and be in the moment. And I have found that with this, I think that's one thing or one reason why podcasting is very cool in the sense, because I will do that outside these moments when I'm able to sit down and chat with guys like you, is I will be thinking of, what's next, planning the schedule, doing all this stuff. And then I get to sit down, stop. There's no cell phones around. We just talk, for an hour or two, whatever it is, and those are the moments I think that you can a person can kind of, I don't know, remove a little bit from all this stuff. And I found it's a great way to at least touch on that a little bit. But yeah, man, this has been so cool. And there was something you brought up there when you're either touring or you're putting out these releases. And there's something I read where you were in a club in Spain, and you realize you're in a club in Spain, you're opening for Deadmau5, and you had one of those moments where you're like, wait, this is amazing. God. Yeah.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I'd actually forgotten about that until just now. But so I was in Madrid, had just gotten to Europe, like first time I played over there, and was just playing like this short tour run with Deadmau5 in like these different cities. And like we were in Berlin the night before, and I'd just flown in, we played a gig there, and then flew to Madrid the next day and played it in this crazy Spanish nightclub called Fabric. And I was doing this like 2-hour set at like 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning, and like this main room with these crazy Spaniards who had more energy than like any other crowd I've played for. And in the middle of the set, I was just like all of a sudden very cognizant of the fact that I was in another country playing music in this crazy club, like right before Deadmau5 came on. And it was just like a kind of like a what the fuck moment. Like, how did I get here? Like, this is absurd. And then the craziest thing was I still had like an hour after that realization. So I was just like intensely lucid for the next hour of the set. But it was cool, man. I had a similar moment recently. Like 2 weeks ago, I played at this desert festival called Desert Hearts, which is it's like 60 miles outside of San Diego, off the grid, and like this house and techno festival where like the music goes for 80 hours nonstop, and it's maybe like it's maybe like 5,000 people who are all just like camping and there, and it's only one stage, and it's this festival that I've been going to for maybe 4 years or so with like all my closest friends, like before I was even really putting out music. And I got to perform there this year, and I had a very similar experience where it was like on stage DJing and just all of a sudden really intensely lucid and conscious of the fact that like this was exactly what I wanted, and like now I'm here doing it, and it's really surreal because you're having that thought, but then you're like, oh wait, I need to transition, like I need to be mixing right now. But
yeah, balancing the I'm in the moment, I'm just loving this, and like, oh wait, I have stuff to do. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, man, that is so cool, man. And I love hearing these stories because it's so cool to see what this process has been like, what this path has been like, and to understand it's as we spoke about, this regimented process to work on music. And then you get to these parts where it's like you had goals early on and they're happening, and you're there and you think, what the what the fuck is happening? This is incredible. I mean, that has to be so and one thing I think is a great time to mention this is that Monophobia remix. I mean, it was a beautiful song. I love the original from Deadmau5 and Rob Swire. But when I was listening to Mouseville Volume 1, when I listened to your remix, I was like, this is what I was looking for with that track.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean,
awesome.
Yeah, man, it is just, it's so beautiful. It's so well done. And that must just be, of course. And you must just be in the same boat there where you're like, what's I'm doing official remixes for Deadmau5,
I was freaking out while I was making that remix because, well, for two reasons. For one is that I only ended up having about 5 days to do it.
Oh my God.
I think, well, so I was working on it and like had a basis for an idea. Then all of a sudden the label's like, hey, we actually want to release, or we actually want to like send this into the distributors next week. Like, can you send us this by this date? And it was like 4 days from then. And so maybe if I had started earlier, I would have had more time, but I think I was working on like another remix at the time or something like that. So for whatever reason, I only had 5 days to do this thing, which was the biggest remix of my life. I mean, still was, or still is. And so I was rightfully freaking out about that fact. But then the second reason I was freaking out was because I was the biggest, and still am, just like a huge Deadmau5 fan.
Yeah.
And I remember just being in the studio and like at the end of a day, just kind of being like, oh my God, like I'm remixing Deadmau5. This is crazy. And like I would listen back to some of his like old random album title tracks just because I wanted to like absorb some of the magic of like some of my favorite tracks from him, and then maybe just instill a little bit of that into my own remix. But I will say those 5 days were probably the happiest I've ever had in the studio. I think because I had good momentum and it was going well and I had an idea. Had it been the opposite and I like didn't have an idea I was excited about, it could have been the worst 5 days in the studio. But,
no, it must be amazing when all of this is coming together and you're sitting there and you're like, okay, I like what's coming out of this remix. Like you everything's kind of clicking.
It's not always
where it's going to go.
It's not always that way for sure. Right. But I don't know if it was a matter of luck or I just was in the right mindset to tackle the project. But for whatever reason, like I had a pretty good idea of what I wanted to do from the start, and then it just worked really well. And I do remember, and this is not an emotion I feel after I finish every EP or remix, but when I finished this one and like turned it in, I was legitimately like super excited for people to hear it because it felt special to me. And like I said, I don't feel that after every release. Like there's some times when I'm like doing my final mix down on an EP and I've heard it for 3 months straight. And, I'm like, I'm excited to put it out, but it's not as fresh anymore. Or maybe I'm like worried about it. But with this remix, because it was such a short turnaround, I was still in that infatuation period with a track. And it was so cool to have it come out like pretty soon after that. And it kind of took on a life of its own on Spotify and all that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It has, man. Because I remember talking with people when because Mouseville 1 was kind of new. He was, or they were doing something different rather than the, We Are Friends compilations, right? So We Are Friends or Mouseville Volume 1 was new, and I was chatting with people and it kept coming up, and I felt the same way. That remix is just on its own so damn beautiful, and so
I appreciate that.
Of course, man. So that must have just been the most incredible. I mean, did you chat with Deadmau5 at all about it after, or did you guys chat at all on the tour? I mean, I'm guessing being on the European tour for quite some time.
I've done a bunch of dates with him now, so I've had like little conversations with him here and there. It's more just like I'll be hanging out after my set, and then he'll finish performing, and then we're usually in the same room with his team. I've grown really close to like the people who do all his lights and sound, and so he'll usually come up and like chat with them after, and those are kind of the times when we'll have like these organic interactions.
Yeah.
But no, we don't. Aside from that, it's not like we're communicating over email or text or anything. So it's mainly just been on the road with him, these little interactions.
That's incredible, though. I mean, it must be the craziest feeling because so one thing I think fits well is because I do want to go back a little bit because so you had releases in 2017. How long was that? Because that kind of ties into everything. I'm just saying it must be crazy to be at 2017 having these releases on Mousetrap. Now over a couple of years touring with him. When did you start year-wise in the DAW? Really seriously working on music, and then when was that iconic? Just to kind of piece everything together time-wise.
Yeah, sure. So I went to Icon, like a music production school, in 2015. Finished 2016. No, I think I was there 20. Yeah, that's right. 20. Okay. So I think right around the time of Icon and the year after, I really started working at it like almost every day and haven't stopped since then, essentially. And even when I launched my project at the beginning of 2017, I wasn't actually ready to launch it, at least in my own terms. It was more that I had this remix opportunity to remix Giorgio Moroder.
Right.
They ended up liking it and wanting to put it out, and I had to all of a sudden scramble to get everything together. And I mean, in hindsight, I probably was ready to launch then, but I think I was probably scared because I think that initial moment of being like, okay, now it's official, my project is public, that's a very scary step that we all have to make. But I don't think I was personally, maybe I just didn't have the courage at the moment to do that. But I'm really grateful that remix kind of forced my hand. And then from there, luckily, I did have a few tracks ready to go because I had spent those couple of years prior just working and sitting on things. And I was thinking like where would I want to send my music to? And Mousetrap just kind of made a lot of sense because they were doing a lot of techno-y stuff at the time, but still had this very large platform and like this huge North American audience. And fortunately, like they were able to take my first single, Renegade. And it was kind of a crazy beginning for me having that Giorgio Moroder remix right into that Mousetrap single, and definitely inspired a little bit of belief in me to keep thinking bigger and bigger. And from that first single, I was like, well, if I did that, like I should try and do an EP. And I spent like the next few months like kind of finalizing that and meeting with the label and the label manager and like making that vision a reality. And I think ever since those steps, it's just been on to like what's the next big vision or big concept that I want to kind of create or make happen. And it wasn't like I started out with that remix knowing exactly that, oh my god, in 2 years I'm going to tour with Deadmau5. Like that's going to be a thing. So all of that stuff just kind of happened along the way. And I think that's something I've realized is that I'll plan out these very specific visions for what I want to happen, and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But what usually happens is something really cool ends up like coming your way, and if you're in the right position to utilize it or to work at it, then you can make really cool opportunities happen that you couldn't even foresee a year ago or 2 years ago.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think that's so important to really understand that because, sometimes the vision is one thing, but you need a couple things. You need the vision, the hard work, and then if you're putting those two together, sometimes it's not going to maybe go that exact path as you mentioned, but something's going to happen. If you're working hard and you're determined and you're working, like things are going to open up. And this is just an example exactly of that because, man, that's incredible, man, to be on this trajectory where it's Icon, it's kind of thrown in with this first remix release, and then boom, things are happening. I mean, that's amazing, man. That's so cool. So I
appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. And you have a lot of stuff that's been out in 2019. You just had the collab with Enamor, which is amazing. Yeah. So
thank you.
Of course. So what was that whole process like, meeting him, working with him, sending tracks back and forth? Because he's not based in California, right?
No, he's in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
So pretty early on, not that early on, maybe like a year ago, I kind of saw his name start to bubble up, and I identified him as someone who was very much on a similar trajectory to me, making similar music and operating in similar spaces. And I just reached out to him, like, I don't know, over Twitter or email, and began talking. And from then on, we've just been sending each other our tracks and mostly giving each other feedback. And he happened to be in Los Angeles a few months ago, and we just thought, like, hey, we might as well get in the studio and see what happens. And he's a big, like, analog and synth fan, just like I am. So I think naturally we worked really well together. And he was over in my Venice studio, and we were just kind of jamming around on my synths, and pretty quickly came up with our song Quark. And yeah, it's been cool. I think I'm very selective in like who I choose to collaborate with, because I think it's really important to get the energy right and make sure you're working with people that you're excited about. And with him, it was like a very natural pairing, and it's been cool. The track has done like really well from like a DJing perspective. Like we gave it to Lane 8 pretty early, and he just started playing it in like all of his sets, and I was like, oh man, I think we're onto something here if he's already playing it.
Man, that's got to be an incredible feeling for real.
Yeah, so it's been cool, man. And I think it's been cool for me too to start working with a few different labels as well. I think that was one thing that I envisioned early on when I started, or maybe even before I started, was I wanted to create this project that could kind of traverse multiple labels, multiple different countries, that would have a huge kind of North American draw, but would also still retain that credibility in the like the European house and techno scene, because that's honestly where my heart really lies, and that's kind of that was important for me to retain that connection. So it's cool to work with labels like Shram's Yoshitoshi, or I work with like this label Chapter 24 in the UK, and a couple of German labels. So I kind of like walking this line of having this like huge crazy platform like Mousetrap as like my home base and something I can do my concept EPs and remixes with, but then also getting kind of my European house and techno affiliations on, starting to plant seeds of my music over there. So it's cool. And so that track Quark is one example of like a track that I was trying to kind of plant more in the European scene, but then also it's so cool to see it get picked up by people like Lane 8 and Rufus Du Sol, who are playing, you know, more in the North American kind of scene. Yeah.
Oh, that's incredible, man. And one thing I wanted to mention as you bring up some of those other labels is that track Temple is beautiful, man. It's just it's such a beautiful fit when the piano comes in partway through the track, and the piano in the track fits so well, but it's still still the energy is there with the track. The piano doesn't, I don't know, it's done so well, man. And that was one that stood out to me, and I was like, oh my god, yeah.
It's crazy. That track was kind of just like a random track on a compilation, and it was like my first thing I did with this UK label Chapter 24, and it ended up being my top selling track on Beatport now. And I'm pretty sure it's because it kind of got a big following in South Africa. I get all these South African artists who message me about it. I think it's kind of, I mean, it has some like Afro house kind of tribal vibes. Right. I think it has like this kind of emotional like sunset quality. So I think it had this kind of organic explosion over there. And
that's awesome.
It's fueling its Beatport success.
Yeah. That's amazing, man. That's the next tour spot.
I would love to. Yeah, I think I like that track in general too, because it's the first time I've worked with like a live instrumentalist. There was this Dutch violinist who was friends with someone else in my studio, and she happened to be in Los Angeles. They were working on some stuff together, and I mentioned like, hey, like if you had some free time, we should just try like writing a track. And, you know, I laid down those piano chords, and then she ended up just kind of like freestyling over it, and just turned out beautiful. And it made me inspired to kind of work with other live instrumentalists. And so I want to incorporate some more like live strings and maybe some like live wind instruments into my new work.
Oh, that would be amazing, because you have this nice blend, especially with the concept albums where it's cinematic and this electronic unique sound that you brought to the table. So having that live component could just be this really interesting door that could open there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it stems from the fact that I listen to a lot of classical music, and that's where I draw a lot of my inspiration. And you're hearing these like huge swelling strings or these amazing like wind instrument melodies. And I get so fascinated by them, and I kind of start imagining in my head like, wow, what would it be like to kind of express like a progression like that with string and wind instruments, but then to have this kind of dark techno foundation under it.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's definitely been the basis of a lot of my tracks, like Forbidden City or Sorcery.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to do it more with live string players now, and eventually have like a whole ensemble. But you know, that's a few
that would
years
be
from
so
now.
cool. Yeah, man. But
Yeah.
and that's got to be the most fun part of this whole thing, as there's these successes, new ideas open up and new doors open up, and this just leads into different paths. I mean, it's never ending, and yeah, man, it must be such a cool position to be in right now. It's 2019 is great releases, you know, and just looking at everything that's happened so far, it's got to be so exciting, man.
Yeah. Oh, it definitely is, man.
Yeah.
But the crazy thing is, I still very much feel like I'm at the beginning of what I want to do, just because I've always had this larger vision in mind of what I want my project to be, where I want it to sit. And I know that I'm still just at the tip of the iceberg of that larger vision. And all these smaller successes that are happening, they're all leading me there. But I still have this kind of very much beginner's mindset, or just like, this is still, I mean, that's why I named my last Mousetrap EP Prologue, was like an ode to the beginning of my career, and that I actually began, you know, and I've set out on this journey. But if like I could show people what I actually see in my head and what I actually want to do, then yeah, they would know like this is really just the beginning.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool, man. I love that idea. And I just love to hear that. And when I think about how you've mentioned there's this idea of creating these worlds associated with the music, I think right now is such an interesting time to have that as your trajectory, because I just think of what's going to come associated with music moving into the future, and there has to be this incorporation of, I mean, imagine VR tied with music, where you'd have this influence on these worlds that you're creating. I mean, that could just be, you know, that has to be around the corner, and you having this influence there could be so interesting.
Yeah, I am super fascinated by everything that's going to happen in the music space with technology. VR is one thing, but also a big thing that I'm really fascinated by is like surround sound, Dolby Atmos, like 3D audio. And it's already starting to pop up. Like you see it in some clubs like Halcyon or Ministry of Sound, or I think it's there's one club in Chicago as well. But I think in the future we're going to have a lot more of these venues and concert settings that are set up for surround sound. And I picture doing this kind of live show where I can really insert people into my environments and landscapes by creating this like 3D immersive kind of sonic landscape around them. Like I want people to feel like they're literally inside of my tracks with like different sounds swirling about. And then to combine that with like these really immersive visualizers, or even VR would be insane. Like if you could have someone inside of a club setting with a VR enabled or even augmented reality, but also surround sound, and like really, I can imagine it, but like I can't actually, I don't know. It's just such a crazy thought to me, but I want to do that so badly.
Totally. And I mean, just to see how things have changed over the years, I feel like it's things, just how technology has evolved.
Yeah.
And VR is so, have you played with VR at all?
I actually haven't that much. And I do have one concern, is that it's kind of like a dystopian vision where you see like in the future and there's all these people in the club and they all have like headsets on. But I also think that's kind of it's going to be an antiquated version of VR. This idea of like these large headsets, like VR will probably be so imperceptible or seamless with our reality that it'll be like a tiny glass in front of our eye, or like the alternative augmented reality AR will be so good that we won't even need any kind of optical device. It's crazy to think about though, man.
It's gonna get so crazy. Yeah. And if you watch those YouTube videos where you see, so I've gone around and I'll look at, okay, what's new in VR, and you'll see the visual portion of what you would see on and it doesn't look that good on what you'd see on the VR goggles. But my girlfriend and I went to this little bar, this little shop down on a bar street here in Tempe, Arizona, where we live, and I tried this VR, and when it's so close up to your eyes, it's so believable, man. And it's very strange. Yeah. You'll just immediately get captivated by what's going on, and we were playing this zombie game, and you will get so immersed in that experience that you'll almost throw the controller, forgetting where you are. It's a very and so that's where we are today. Imagine in 5-10 years, it is going to change big time, and seeing where music's going to go with that's going to be crazy.
Yeah, it's amazing, and I think it actually aligns really well with what I've always been trying to do, which is to create something that's more than just music, but like, to be able to present a whole world or landscape or story with your music. And I think in the future, being able to deliver a VR experience as an EP, where it's not just releasing 3 tracks, but you're releasing this world that literally people can go inside of, like that's really exciting to me. So both from both from a DJing and touring standpoint, but also just our experience of music and home listening, I think is gonna greatly change over the years.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And you almost kind of think that Spotify knows it, because have you noticed where you listen to songs now on Spotify and they have a video that comes up now and it's changing over the...
I feel a little bit.
I feel like, and usually it's not crazy production quality or anything, but they have to know, okay, there's this market here. There's this opportunity where tying music to a visual component is so powerful, and it might be very simple today, just looking at your iPhone and seeing some, small video play, and okay, that's great. But where that could go, as you mentioned, could just be having something like that, like a 3-track EP where there's a whole from start to finish immersive experience visually is, could be so cool.
Yeah, I've just always liked the idea of being kind of a multimedia artist. Like, yes, music is my primary medium, but I think any great artist has an ability to kind of transcend just one medium and kind of work between different disciplines. And I think especially the bigger you get, you start to be able to dabble in things like film and TV or the art world. And that's really exciting to me, because I know music is, again, 100% my main passion right now. But I think as I get older too, I'll probably become interested in these kind of tangential fields. And I've always just wanted to make that vision of my music as big as possible, and so incorporating things like VR in the future and film, it's just exciting for me, and it keeps me plugging along on this journey.
I would imagine, for sure. And that's just, you look at someone like Deadmau5 now, and this is I think this is just such a funny way this has all come together, because when I saw Deadmau5 for the first time was 2010 at EDC. And I saw your post today. We were at the same EDC, and remember his cube, or what he didn't actually have the... Wait, no.
No, it was the Cube.
The Cube there. Yeah, he debuted the Cube.
I don't know if it was the debut, but the Cube was definitely there, because I remember seeing the Cube.
Yeah, but it was different. It was V1, and it was amazing. Sure. It was but you've seen how this progression has changed over time, and now it's having... He's such a great example of this visual component, especially live, being so incredible, tied to the music, and it's funny that we were both there. I remember the first track he played was that not exactly extended mix, and that's still one of my favorite songs of all time. And he opened with that. And
really, oh my god, I don't even remember that, but that was at the time one of my favorite Deadmau5 songs as well. I had heard I Remember, but then once I found like Not Exactly and Faxing Berlin. I was like, I loved I Remember, and that was like, oh my god, what is this? Who is this guy? Like, what is this world? But then hearing those tracks after, like, really cemented my passion for him, and then all of Random Album Title. But that's so cool, man. It's kind of insane how many people I've talked to who were also at EDC in Los Angeles that year in 2010. Like, how many people who are working in music or tangentially involved in music. For so many of us, that was such like a seminal moment, and it's so funny because none of us knew each other then, but we were all right there in that same audience. Like, it's just so cool to me.
Yeah, something happened that night. We all got struck with something. It's true though. Like, all these people, I've spoken with so many people, and I get the same feedback. People that were there, it was such a special experience, and just being on the floor. I don't know if you remember, like, earlier in the day, people were climbing up those rafters, and Little John came out and was yelling at people to get down.
Oh my god, no.
Because we were on Yeah.
Yeah, but I do remember, so I had gotten separated from my friends, so I was like alone at this massive rave for the first time, and I was okay with it, but I would have preferred to have been with my friends, but I was like, I'm alone, but I'm committed to seeing Deadmau5. He's my guy. Like, I'm gonna make sure I get a good spot. So I went in the stadium and I was like stuck up in the bleachers because they had stopped people from going down to the floor, and I was in this like angry mob of people who were very disgruntled and not happy to be stuck, and they ended up like rushing through the security, and security just kind of like let them go because they didn't want to get like stepped on or trampled, which was very, very scary in the moment. But I was able to get through to the floor, and it was like still 2 hours before Deadmau5 came on, and like I was at the very back of the entire stadium, and I was like, oh my god, this is gonna be a mission, but I have like a long time, like I'm committed. And I spent like the next 2 hours like slowly working my way up, literally as close as I could go. And like there was one point I had to like hop over this little VIP barrier and like did it really quickly, and then was all of a sudden in this like super close section to the stage that wasn't that populated, and like I just was literally the closest person to the stage, and I was like, oh my god, I did it. Like this took 2 hours, but like I'm here. Yeah. And I still remember the feeling of like turning around and seeing an entire stadium of people, just the full Coliseum, like listening to Deadmau5. Like that was such a crazy vision that is still kind of imprinted into my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, man. It was amazing. It was beautiful. I remember, I think people that are going to raves now that weren't going, I mean, that's almost 10 years ago now. There was
crazy.
it was different because at that time in LA, it was still relatively new, and there were riots that would break out at these, and riot police would come to events like that. Because my cousin lived in LA, and he had been to ones where he was at like Hard LA, and police shut it down because there was this explosion of interest in electronic music events when EDC came on the scene. I mean, it blew up, and they didn't know what to do at first, and that was a real concern: is people rushing, people rioting, people climbing over fences and stuff. I mean, it's different now. They've figured out all that stuff. They just have these massive EDC events in Las Vegas now. But it was like the Wild West at that point, I feel like. It was a little different.
I do remember those early raves and festival experiences had this kind of like sketchy underground quality to them, where like I don't know if it was a symptom of how old I was, or I think like you were saying, they probably did have a little bit more like riotous energy to them. But I do remember the feeling of walking around and being like, this is a completely new space. Like I felt safe, but like it's such a foreign environment, and it's so like loud, and if you haven't been there before, it's just like stimulus overload. And there was that feeling of like, again, it's not like it was dangerous, but it did feel like a little bit like this night underground world. This crazy energy to it that was also very exciting. And then I'm sure that still exists. I mean, I think with like underground events, you still get that now. And I'm sure still people going to EDC for the first time still feel a little bit of that. But there was this kind of magic to it around that era in like 2010. And again, it could be my naivete at the time that it was this new thing that, and again, it might be not that different, but I'll never forget that feeling, that kind of like this magic world kind of unlocking.
Oh, I feel the exact same way. I really do. I feel like it was magical, and we could be in the same boat. I mean, it was so new. I was, let me think about this, early 20s, like 20, 21, 22. So I was just, this is brand new, and it was so exciting. But the energy was, it felt a little, when I saw people going, because if you go halfway back into that stadium, they had the speaker, like the large towers for the speakers halfway through the floor of the Coliseum. And this was early in the day. So it might have been, you were in, one of the different areas, but we got on the floor like right away, and it was early. It might have been for Afrojack. I forget. It was someone early in the day, and they had to stop, pause it. Lil Jon came out, which is the weirdest fucking thing. Lil Jon, and in his voice, was yelling at people not to climb up the speaker towers. I mean, it was the first thing I'd gone to. I was like, what is this? And
what is this place?
Yeah. It was insane. And I saw Boys Noise. It was either that night to close out the night or the second night to close out the night. And that was one of the craziest sets I've ever seen because he was new to me, and it was like going from Deadmau5 Above and Beyond to Boys Noise. I was like, what is this? Yeah, man. But now you're playing at EDC in like, what, 4 days or something like that, right around the corner this weekend.
I think I'm leaving in 2 or 3 days. Yeah, it's going to be cool, man. I think that's one thing that's been really awesome to work with Mousetrap is that they end up bringing me along to these various festivals. Mm-hmm. And like it's because of them that I got to play Electric Forest and that I'm getting to play EDC now and even Ultra before that. And I think it's really awesome to find a label that kind of invests a little bit in their artists as well and helps them not only release their music but kind of perform as well. And it's exciting. It's also the first time I'll be doing like a back-to-back performance, at least like officially at a festival or club or anything. So I'm going to be playing with Matt Lang at 4 a.m., which is definitely our hour because we definitely like our little bit of after hours techno and whatnot. So yeah, it should be cool, man.
Oh, that's going to be amazing, man. And I haven't actually been to EDC in Las Vegas, but as I understand it, it is huge. Isn't it something, do you know the number by chance? I know it's just astronomical.
Attendance?
In attendance. Hundreds of thousands, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
Am I way off?
I want to say it's probably around 100,000 a day, maybe a little bit more.
That's
I think
crazy.
Often we see these like festival statistics where it's like there were 350,000 people here, but what they're normally doing is like adding each day's attendance together.
Yeah.
They would,
but still, I mean, 100 either way.
That's insane.
It's insane. It's so insane, man. And that's got to be super exciting. I've been talking with some other guys. Julian Gray has come on the podcast. He's going to come back on, and we were trying to plan it. And he's like, "Oh yeah, but I'm going to EDC right now." I'm like, "Well, okay." I mean, it's so cool. All you guys are supported, and there was that there was the mouse. There's like the Mousetrap house in Miami. There was some promo behind that. That was so cool.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I like that Mousetrap kind of goes above and beyond, not just to release music, but to help create these experiences for both their artists and their fans. And it's been cool. Like Monster Get Down, for instance, has become one of my better like producer friends, and he's Mousetrap family, and it's definitely really cool to be able to like play these events and like see all these guys again. Like in this past Miami where we did Ultra, there was like a Mousetrap brunch where we all were able to get together, and it's really awesome, man.
That's so cool because I would imagine and I imagine a lot of people listening who are earlier on and their dream is to get signed on a label or release on Mousetrap, having that communal portion would just, I think, be so profound and so important because you guys all share in this love for the music, this love for the label. Because people love this label, I mean, really. So,
yeah, definitely.
And for that to be supported and for everyone to come together is so cool. And I think that adds a lot, man. I think that really adds a lot. And I think that's smart for the label to do because you meet one another, you spend time with one another. It becomes this really collaborative thing that's moving forward. And it's really cool.
Yeah, no, they've been a great home for me. And beyond that, they've always been very open and accepting to my vision, whatever it may be, letting me go as cinematic as I want on my releases or bringing in some crazy art to pair alongside the release. So I really appreciate their trust in my creative vision as well.
Yeah, dude, it's so cool, and there's some things we've spoken about, but I'm sure along the way for 2019, there's a lot that's coming. Even though it's insane definitely how fast this year is going, but yeah. So then, what's on the agenda for 2019?
Yeah, so I just finished writing 3 remixes, which took a long time. I feel like the last 2 months of mine were spent like playing some DJ sets, but mostly just in the studio working on remixes. And those are going to start to come out. There's one coming out at the end of May, and then I'm not sure on the date for the other 2, but those have been cool because they're all kind of a different section of my style or a different kind of shade of my sound. And I like having the opportunity to show different sides of my production. I never wanted to be an artist with just like one very, very specific sound. Like I like kind of dabbling in other genres a little bit while still sounding like myself. So those are coming up. I've also made a whole EP with two of the guys from Desert Hearts, Marbs and Evan Casey. These are some like really dark, twisted, yet still cinematic techno tracks. And they've been getting like a crazy response. Like there's been a few DJs who played them at Coachella and stuff. These I can tell are going to be like dance floor bombs. So that's gonna happen in July. And then, yeah, just, working on other original material. Going out to Europe again in August.
Yeah.
And yeah.
That's amazing.
Whatever else lays on the horizon that I don't even know yet.
Yeah. Dude, that's so cool. And I mean, we're right next door. You're over in California. I'm here in Arizona. So I always promote the Arizona coming through Phoenix, playing a show. Surprisingly, man, a lot of people have been coming through. Like the festival scene's picking up here.
I believe it.
Yeah. I mean, we Decadence for New Year's has gotten really crazy.
I saw that.
Yeah. So that's been super cool. But then still people come through Arizona. Like Julian was here maybe like a month ago. So that was cool. But yeah, man, this is just, go ahead. Sorry. I didn't mean to.
No, I was just going to say I haven't played there yet. So it would be cool to at some point.
Yeah. Oh yeah, man. Yeah. Arizona and I say this, but don't come, like it just actually today was like the first day it got hot. It was 100 degrees out. And, I mean, you know, but California, you're by the ocean. So it's way more manageable, but it gets hot here for like, yeah. Not excited, but dude, this has been amazing, man. For real. Being able again just to chat with you, and not to discredit anyone who's come on this podcast, because I've spoken with people who I would not have thought I'd been able to speak with, and everyone who's come on is fucking awesome, and I've loved it. But to have known your music, to have, when I started this, thought like, man, speaking with Rinzen would be amazing, just following your trajectory and such, and having this happen is amazing. And actually, I have your sticker right here. I don't know if you can see that.
I see it. Yeah, I can.
Yep.
That's rad.
So, man. Yeah. So fuck, man. I'm a big supporter of what's going on, what's happening. And for real, as always, man, anytime you want to do this again, if you want to do it in a year, whatever, if you want to just sit down, talk releases, talk about, what I'm guessing is the process won't change, which is okay. It's good. You'll just be like on the same day, just knocking it out. Yeah. But man, if you want to come back on at any time and talk music and releases, I'd love to do it.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you having me on, man. And again, I think I said it at the start of the podcast, but I have a lot of respect for what you're doing here. I think this is such a specific niche of people, like upcoming artists in the electronic music space. Well, I know you speak to researchers and teachers as well, but regardless, I think this is a very, specific and really cool niche that people can get a lot of benefit from, and you're kind of amplifying these voices that don't always get heard. So I'm looking forward to seeing your podcast growing, and I would definitely love to come back on someday.
Cool, man. Yeah, thank you. I honestly, from the bottom of my heart, appreciate you saying that. And it's been, it's been cool, man. And I'm excited to see where it goes. And I would just, love to do more and more episodes. And along the way, I will be just following your music and promoting the hell out of it, and just stoked to see what's coming around the corner.